Howdy, it's Kyle talking about the field of emergency management. With so many natural disasters going on in the past several years, I thought it would be interesting to talk about what goes on in that building, the government facility that's supposed to protect you before, during, and after a disaster. You've all heard of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. For 3.5 years, I worked for the South Carolina Emergency Management Division, which is the state version of FEMA. And then after that, I worked 3 years for the Monterey County in California Emergency Management. So I got to work for several years at both state and local levels. And at both places, I worked also with FEMA at the national level based on things that were going on. So what I want to discuss in this video is just kind of what goes on in that field. So I'll discuss what I did on a day-to-day basis, my normal type job, and then what would happen when we went into emergency mode when there was a disaster going on, the response of it, and then what went on afterward in terms of the recovery. And I'll talk about some specific things that I went through working there, but also some more hypothetical type examples, and also what we might do now if we were faced with some of the disasters going on as I record this video. So what is emergency management? There are 4 phases: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Mitigation are the actions you can take before something occurs to lessen the impact or reduce the damage of a disaster. Preparedness is what you're actually going to do. You can't go blindly into an event. You have to be prepared for it. Response is the first responders, the things that are going on immediately as the event is occurring. If it's a weather event, it'll be while the storm is going on. And then recovery is after the event, the rebuilding process, just getting things back to normal. So a little background on how I got this job. I was living in Columbia, South Carolina. I have a degree in geography with a specialization in climatology. So I have knowledge of weather and climate type stuff. So I got hired on at the Emergency Management Division. My day-to-day job was a natural hazard mitigation and preparedness planner. So I would do things involving, natural hazard planning, and I'll get into some of the details of that. But you would switch mode when you went into when there was a disaster going on after emergency declaration. So I'm going to talk about some of my day-to-day type stuff working in mitigation planning. So what is mitigation and preparedness planning? So working at the state level, there are 46 counties in South Carolina. So about 5 of them are maybe capable enough to do a lot of the things on their own. Maybe 10 other ones have some capabilities but need some help. But most of the counties in the state are very small, rural, and the state has to provide a lot of the resources for these counties. So what I would do is coordinate with some of the local officials at the county or city level to see what they needed in terms of mitigation and preparedness for disaster. So one of the main things I would do is work with local officials for the coastal counties, where what I want to do is make sure that every public building, every important building would have hurricane shutters for their windows. So and it could be a minor hurricane type storm that just maybe has some wind and some rain, but with some debris flying around, if it hits into a window, the window goes out. It can be a relatively minor storm, but once water gets blown in there and it can get flooded, you can have millions of dollars of damage. So that was an important thing for me with getting hurricane shutters onto all these public buildings. So we would write grants for getting these things on there. And another thing was having hurricane tie-down straps. These were basically essentially just rubber straps that would connect the roof to the frame. So you can have a brick building that can, by the chinny chin chin, can withstand a big storm, but the roof might get torn off. So you have a beautiful brick shell, but was flooded. So hurricane straps tying things down, shutters on the windows and doors. And these are great grants because this is a really cost-effective way to reduce damage. So that's a big deal with getting FEMA grants. So that's something I would do, is write the grants for these small counties. So you often hear about how maybe a small county, these rural areas, don't get the funding that the bigger cities get, that the bigger counties get, because what's going on is, say, FEMA, there isn't enough money to go around to put hurricane shutters and tie-down straps to the roofs of every single building in the coastal South. So maybe they have money for 500 buildings, but there are maybe 5,000 buildings that need that. So no one's going to agree to pay enough taxes increased so that FEMA can put hurricane shutters on every house. So they have limited funding, so you're competing for it. So a lot of times these rural counties don't get the funding because maybe they don't have the capabilities to write the grant. So that's what I would do. I'd write some of these grants for things to get the stuff funded for these smaller counties. So you might have a great proposal. You might have this whatever county. One I worked with closely was Williamsburg County. So really, really poor rural county. So they might have the right cost benefit, but they don't know how to put it together And FEMA is not going to just award you $1 million to do something when you haven't put together the right cost benefit analysis, and that's a big deal with it. So people can complain about the federal government, but they have to rely on your ability to put that grant together. So, and if FEMA came down to your small town to do it, to try to big time that small county, you wouldn't want that either. So FEMA relies on the people being able to say what they want in the way that needs to be said. Because again, you can have the right proposal, but you can't show it cost benefit analysis. So I would do that. That was a big deal for the coastal counties, but some of the other counties, the big deal was to make sure we had really good generators for all the important buildings. So not just the hospitals and the police station, but also just any kind of facilities where you might need to have an emergency shelter. So large gyms or things, you need to make sure that everything has good generators, not the $50 one from Home Depot. You got to have the good ones that are really expensive. So that's a big part of reducing damage, because when power goes out, those areas that have the big facilities you really need are the ones that are going to get the power back on first. So if these facilities already have their own internal power being generated, that's one less power crew that has to go to that facility. They can go to this neighborhood instead. So it's good if everybody has their stuff up front. It's less you have to respond to when it all hits the fan. So that's some of the stuff that I would do on a day-to-day basis. Just work with some of these local people to get what they need, because they might not often be able to get the funding they need because they might not have the people able to write the grants. Okay, so what about preparedness planning? So something else I did was involved with preparedness. So that's what are you going to do when a storm or whatever type of event hits. So a big one for us in South Carolina would be hurricane evacuation. So we got to prepare for this up front. You can't just wing it when it hits. So we need to get an idea of how we're going to move a ton of people off the coast inland. So in 1999, before I was working there, Hurricane Floyd was a major storm that came up the East Coast, did tons of flooding. None of the states on the East Coast were prepared for it, but that was the catalyst to Virginia and the Carolinas to do a better job with the response. And so every state had to come up with, okay, we needed something better than what we screwed up the response there. So I was there when they were in the process of improving that. So a big one was interstate lane reversal. So you have 2 lanes in each direction, right? But during an evacuation, those 2 going to the coast do no good. So the reversal has the 2 lanes that are going to go to the coast also head back inland. So that's a big coordination, because you have to make sure every on-ramp is blocked. I mean, it's pretty complicated, but Georgia was really smart. So even though they were the least affected by Floyd, they came up with the idea to make the reverse lane way, way, way easier. So normally what you would do is have cops or public works have to go to every single on-ramp and leave a car there or a K-rail or something, or public works, or just, even if it's just some pencil pusher with a county going to all the exits putting police tape around it, it's still resources being used. So what Georgia did, very smart, they put the railroad crossings. So all you have to do is push a button from the state capitol and all those arms come down. You don't have to worry about people coming backward onto the interstate that's going the other way. So Georgia was very smart. That's a really good cost benefit way to spend a few million to have major benefits. So that's part of preparedness. You brainstorm, because not everyone has all the ideas. One thing that I came up with was really cool was coordinating with churches. So the Bible Belt, we have a lot of churches there. So, these churches that have a large congregation, maybe they have 3 or 4 church vans, and on the weekends, maybe they have to pick up, Miss Jackson, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. So they need to pick them up because they don't have transportation. Well, if you need to pick them up to get to church on Sunday, then if there's an evacuation, they need to get out as well. So we would work with these churches. Hey, you have, 4 vans that can hold, 40 people combined. You have 20 people that need to get out in the evacuation. Can we use your other 2 vans? So you need to keep track of who you need to get out. If you don't need those other 2 vans, let us know. We need to keep a resource checklist of every van, every bus we got on the coast to get people out. That was pretty cool. I'm proud of myself for coming up with that, to work with the churches, because they have transportation of vans, and that was 20 years ago. So if your state is not doing that now, 20 years ago, South Carolina, we were doing that. So something else was with horses. A lot of, you forget about animals and disasters, right? So South Carolina is a popular state for people to winter their horse. A lot of folks from upstate New York, Vermont will come down to South Carolina to winter their horse. Well, hurricanes occur in the time of year when you're not wintering a horse. They happen in the summer and fall. So you have it's near a town called Aiken, and that's near Augusta, Georgia. So a lot of folks winter their horses there, a lot of stables, a lot of horse infrastructure, trailers. So maybe there's a guy in Charleston with 2 horses, or say he has 4 horses, and he only has a trailer that can hold 2. He's like, what am I going to do? So we would coordinate with people in Aiken. Okay, you have trailers there. You don't need them right now because your horses are up in Vermont or whatever. So can you get your trailers down there to get this guy's 2 horses or his 4 horses in your trailer? But then that guy that didn't need it, now he has a trailer with 2 that can be used somewhere else. So this is what we're kind of doing preparedness wise. You have to do this up front. You can't wait till the disaster to happen. You have to have these MOUs, these memorandums of understanding in place before. You have to be, you can't just call them up on the day of the disaster. Hey, can we use your van? No, you have to know about it before. So these are the type of things you have to work with. And a big part of preparedness is also going to be training. So you can imagine a job like this, probably 25% of what we did was just training. We were always in training. So whether it be, we're going to plan for, we're going to pretend it's a Category 5 hurricane making landfall at Charleston, the biggest possible hurricane in our biggest city on the coast. So, or maybe a Category 2 hurricane make landfall at Myrtle Beach. What are we going to do if it's smaller? Or maybe it's a Category 5 that makes landfall at Jacksonville or Savannah. We're going to get it pretty bad too. Or, there were ones where, it looked like it was going to go east. It probably wasn't going to hit us, but we still had to be ready for it, because what if the storm turned and hit us? So we had to still be in the office ready for it, even though, let's be honest, we were sitting there on our phones doing nothing. But you need us there sitting on our phones doing nothing in case that storm does turn. So mitigation is, when it hits, hurricane shutters, less damage. Preparedness, training, what are you going to do when it happens? Okay, response, it's hit the fan. We're going go, go, go. What happens then? Okay, so when an event happens, I'm not at my desk writing grants for hurricane shutters. So what am I doing? We're in what's called the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. So what happens is the governor will sign an emergency declaration. So that activates the EOC. So now we're in official disaster mode. So everyone that's a planner or whatever you do, you go into whatever you do disaster mode. So in a response, I'm not a first responder. I'm not a law enforcement, fire, EMS, public works, the people that are out there in it. I'm in the EOC. So you might have seen on movies that big room with all the TVs, giant monitors. There's a big one in the middle, the bunch of tables. Everyone's got a phone on each ear. It's the old school landline phones with the swithy line rubber cables. That's it. That's exactly how it is. So we're in there coordinating with what's going on. And when I was at South Carolina, there was never a major disaster. There was a couple of minor ones. So the biggest one that I had to deal with was an ice storm, actually. So it didn't get much press. It didn't seem like that big of a deal. And it certainly wasn't dire at the time. But what happened, it was just really cold. It got down to single digits temperatures as the highs, I believe. And the overnight lows were they're like -2. And this is South Carolina. So the trees aren't ready to handle that. Trees would freeze, big limbs would snap off, land on frozen power lines that would snap. And I mean, it was massive destruction. There wasn't just power out, it was the destruction to the power infrastructure. So the immediate response the recovery was gnarly. So, but what was I doing on the 2 nights of the really bad ice storm? So I'm at the desk. I've been assigned to some of the counties. So the main counties that were affected were the ones in the upstate, the mountainous counties near the part of the state that's been hit recently with some of the floods. So I was assigned to, I don't remember all the counties, but maybe 3 or 4 small counties, but one called Abbeville was the one that I was working with the most. So what would happen here? So a lot of trees down. So I'm in contact with the Abbeville sheriff, people, the public works. So they're saying, okay, State Route, whatever, 47 has these many trees down, power lines down. We need to get, this was an important road. And so we need this here. So somebody else is calling, okay, County Highway 56 is the same thing. So, the power crews say they have 3 crews, but there's 5 spots they need to be. They know where the power's out. The power crews are doing the dispatching and stuff, but where are they going next? Normally they go with who has the most people. So say there's 10,000 people out of power here, 2,000. Well, you're in that 2,000, you better have to wait. But in this type of case, it wasn't just the population; it was also, the road. So I would be, okay, 57 connects this to this. The hospital's here. The ambulances are here. This is where the road is screwed. We need this one cleared first because the ambulance substation is different than the hospital. So it'd be my job to kind of figure out, I'm not the dispatcher for the electric company, but they need to know which road is more important. Not they know the number of people out of power. It's all on their computer and stuff, but which road needs to go first. And I don't want to make it sound like I was like, hey, do this and that, but it kind of was. In a disaster like this, the chain of command, it's not different, but things happen very fast in government when there's an emergency. So normally something like this, I would put it together and have to go through a process up. But in this, I would go, hey, Steve, we need this road cleared first. There's a hospital ambulance here. This one needs to go before this one. There are more people here, but I'm sorry, it's just residential. So, and those are the type of things we have to decide sometimes. But this is what I was doing during the course of the night. So, all right, so we'd be like, all right, this truck, they have a bulldozer and a backhoe and a dump truck here. They got the same thing over here. These guys are going to be done in an hour. This spot needs it, so we'll get these. This will be done first. These guys are going to go here. They're going to go here. These guys don't need the backhoe anymore. They just need the other stuff. But you got to have the flatbed truck that gets the backhoe there. So they got to, okay, these guys, you need the bulldozer for 2 hours. It'll take you an hour to get the backhoe there and back. So then, it's that kind of stuff. So you're just like, phone here, got writing with your, and this is a minor event in South Carolina, an ice storm. It wasn't a huge deal. So, but, I was on the phone. I'm doing stuff like this, relatively minor stuff. So think about a huge, huge event. It's a mess. And I'll get to the recovery, because that one, the recovery was the nightmare. So the other one where they activated the EOC was Hurricane Charlie in 2004. So what happened here was this was a huge storm that hit Florida. 2004 was a gnarly year for hurricanes. It was, really, really bad. So Hurricane Charlie, you're probably thinking South Florida. What are you talking? It hit us, and it did. It hit South Florida, came back out, and re-hit South Carolina. But it wasn't anywhere near as strong. So we knew the storm was coming. It was, we can see the map. We can see the radar. It's coming. But it's probably going to go east. It's probably going to hit North Carolina more. And even if it does, it's not going to be a major storm. It's not one we're going to evacuate for. So, but it might. So so again, we're going to be in the EOC being prepared for this in case it turns and we do have to do a quick evacuation. That'd be tough. But this particular storm, people in the Carolinas, if you live on the coast, you're resilient to up to a Category 2 hurricane for the most part. There's always low-lying areas, always mobile home parks that can flood. So there's always going to be issues. But if you live in the south on the coast, Category 2, you're going to be fine. It's kind of like in California, a 5-point earthquake, you're fine. So, but Category 3, okay, now we're getting up to where, we might have to start moving people. And, South Carolina, the people on the coast is way more than the population, because you got Charleston, 500,000 people in the county, but there's so many Airbnbs, hotels, there's so many tourists there. Those beach houses that are for rent, they're supposed to have 6 people there, but there are 26 in there. I did that too when I was in college. Rented a beach house, there's way more in there. So there's always way more people on the beach than you think there are going to be. That makes, because evacuations, hurricanes are summer and fall. That's exactly when people are on the beach, summer and fall. So it was always just, if it hits, it's going to be bad. I never was involved, again, with a huge evacuation that had to be ordered. So, but let's say Hurricane Charlie, it turned. So say it was looking like it was going to come and hit us. So category, say it's expected to be, Category 4, big storm, when it's going to make landfall in Charleston. So what are we going to do here? So the first thing that's going to happen is the governor is going to give a voluntary evacuation order. So a voluntary evacuation order is a polite way of the governor saying, if you're middle class or you're rich, GTFO. Get out of here. You can afford it. Get out. Get a Best Western in Columbia, Spartanburg, Raleigh, Huntsville, Birmingham. Get off the coast. You can afford it. They're not going to say that. They're not going to come on TV and say, rich folks, get out of here. We need the resources for the poor folks, people that don't have the stuff. So voluntary evacuation. So then it gets bad. So then the mandatory evacuation comes. So what does that mean? You don't have to leave. I start do the bunny ears over and over again, but you don't have to leave. What a mandatory, they're not going to come by and arrest you, but what a mandatory evacuation means is while the storm is going on, they are not coming to help you. So if you have a heart attack or something falls on, you're not going to get an ambulance coming to you during the hurricane. It's a mandatory evacuation. So again, you don't have to leave technically, but they're not coming for you. So, and you can't expect them. You can't expect fire crews or paramedics to risk their lives in the middle of the storm to help you who was told to evacuate. So, and that can be cruel, but you can't risk a paramedic crew in a disaster. You can't. They have to be hunkered down. I mean, they have to be. So that's what that means. Mandatory meaning they're not going to come and help you. So that's the response. So I'm going to go talk a little bit about this event going on as I'm recording this in Western North Carolina, East Tennessee, the Southern Appalachians in general, Southwest Virginia. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's really, really bad. So say I was working in South Carolina, this storm, say I'm still working there right now. What would we have done? And you're not going to want to hear this, but nothing. I mean, there's nothing we could have done. And that's a really frustrating part of emergency management sometimes, because what could we have done? So say you can't evacuate the mountains. What do you can say? I mean, you can't, there's no way anybody thought that storm was going to be as bad as it was. People that live in the mountains know which creeks flood. They've been through a million storms. I mean, same thing here in Chattanooga. I mean, it's storm. We know what that creek, we know, don't go there. We know what areas flood. So if you live in these mountains, you know the haulers that flood, the ones that have the flash flooding, the creeks that rise, you know all that. This storm, nobody knew. I mean, there's nothing you can do. And so it can be really frustrating because, 50 years ago, we were people walking on the moon, and in 50 years, people walking on Mars, but there's nothing we could have done with this. And it can be frustrating when Mother Nature pulls out the trump card. And in this case, you couldn't have evacuated the mountains. I mean, I hate to say it, there's nothing we could have done. So preparedness for that type of flooding in the mountains, and we would have things stationed in all throughout the state. So North Carolina probably has things in Raleigh, Greensboro, Charlotte, probably in Asheville as well. But the stuff in Asheville may have been washed away. So maybe you got to bring in resources from Charlotte or Winston-Salem, but the roads are closed. So, these rural counties, again, same with South Carolina, they rely on the states to provide the major resources. But if the state can't get there, and there aren't that many roads, so that particular disaster, I hate to say it, but nobody's at fault. There's no blame to be pushed. Now, everyone's going to push blame on somebody else, but there's no blame on that one. That's just Mother Nature's in control. So, it's frustrating, but so the response is going to be weird. That's a different, you've seen the memes, something's different in italics. Well, that's this for emergency management. What's going on in the Appalachians right now it's different. That's not. So I can't get into the details with that because of I don't know what they're doing specifically, but it's a lot of work, a lot of road clearing. It's a mess. It's unprecedented what they're doing there. But yeah, so that would be that specific event. So, but yeah, if we were in South Carolina, we couldn't have ordered an evacuation for the mountains. North Carolina can't say, all right, guys, leave the mountains. There's 500,000 people there. And even then, if you were to do that, it wouldn't just be the areas affected, because you wouldn't know the entire area that was affected. You have to evacuate everything, including probably here, Chattanooga, certainly Knoxville. You would have had to evacuate because you wouldn't know where it would go. Roanoke. So you'd have to evacuate a couple of million. You can't do that. I guess technically there's a greater than 0% chance you could do that, but you can't. You can't evacuate. So, the best possible scenario in this exact situation would be if people back there stockpiled water, but you don't plan on this. So, yeah, that's the response. So those are the types of things that we would do during the disaster. So obviously first responders are doing their thing. I didn't have anything to do with that. They're doing their own chain of command, and the power companies are dispatching. I'm not doing dispatching, but it's kind of like shell game what to do with some of these resources during a disaster. That's kind of what I would do. And it wasn't just me by any chance. It was bunch of folks. So, but yeah, so that was the response. So, but then the storm ends, the tornado outbreak is over. What happens when we get through the response phase and we got to start going to recovery? Okay, so the recovery phase is what takes by far the longest. This can take forever. It can be incredibly frustrating. This is where it gets gnarly. So this is where you get into damage assessments. That's the first thing you do. You've done the first response. You've cleared the roads. The power's back on. The boil water advisory's over. Okay, time to clean up. What happened? What went on? So this is where damage assessment comes in. So this is where the local, state, and this is where FEMA finally comes in. So I'll get to FEMA's role when I talk about what does the government have to do in all this. But this is where this is the first part where FEMA kind of takes over, sort of, when we get to the recovery phase. But so you got damage assessment. So this is where we're going through these areas. Like this building's down, this building's down. This is that expensive. This was that. This road took that. This road took 2 crews 2 days to work on this all night, overtime, extra people. We had to bring in folks from a different county. Folks from Kentucky were coming in. Everyone's getting paid. No one's doing this for free. So we all get, not me, but I did actually too. But the first responders, the real people, get overtime. But I want that to be a segue into what is the government's responsibility? What can you count on the government to do? What should the government be doing? And where does that line of personal responsibility switch to government responsibility? Okay, so I'll start with the top, the president and your governor. And after a disaster, everyone's like, where's the president? Where's the governor? Where's FEMA? So the governor signs an emergency declaration saying, yes, there's an emergency here. Goes on to the federal government. The president signs it. Yes, this is in fact a declared disaster. That's it. From that point forward, the president and your governor have absolutely nothing to do with the response. They have nothing to do with it. They'll go on TV and take the credit or blame. That's it. They have nothing to do with it. So you think about the press conferences during a disaster. They have the governor on TV, blah, 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 what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But then always, I'm going to turn the microphone over to the director of emergency management, and they will answer the questions for you. So that's about the only time you'll always see the governor hand the mic over to somebody else for a while. So in a disaster, the governor should not be involved. You need to be back doing nothing. So during this ice storm event in South Carolina, the governor wasn't even in the EOC. He was at home in the governor's mansion. And of course, people are calling him, hey, governor, here's the update. This road's closed. Power's back on here, blah, blah, blah. So he's involved. It's not like he's just falling asleep. He was involved, but he wasn't doing anything. He was being updated, but he was doing what he was supposed to be doing, which is nothing. And when I was in California, of course, it's strange when the governor's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he was involved in training event. I was never involved with anything major at the state level. When I was at Monterey, I'll get to that in a little bit about the county level, what you do there. But for training, he would just kind of sit back and do nothing. And that's what you're supposed to do because you are not the emergency manager. You're not the meteorologist. You're not the soil scientist. You're not the engineers. You're not the Army Corps of Engineers. You're not any of that stuff. You're the freaking governor. So stay over there, sign the thing that says emergency, and that's it. So don't blame the president. Don't blame the governor. Bush took a huge hit for Hurricane Katrina response. I'm sorry. It wasn't the president's fault. It wasn't George Bush's responsibility to make sure that the city of New Orleans, Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, the state of Louisiana was ready. So it's not the government's fault, and it's also not it's not the president or the governor. But also, what about us? So say I'm in that building. So how much blame do you put on people like me in that office if something goes wrong? And that is lots and lots and lots of blame because we are literally the people paid an above average state salary to work. That's why we exist, to be in that building to make sure things go as smoothly as possible. So we should get the blame during that, even though it usually is going to be the people higher than us. But it's also very important to know that FEMA is not your state and local response. FEMA is there to supplement your state and local response. So you may have seen it on TV, cop shows and stuff. The Jim Bob, Billy Ray, local cop, and here comes the big bad FBI in their Cadillac SUV, and they got the dark shades, and they're, we'll take it over from here, sir. It's not like that with FEMA. FEMA, the state, under the governor's emergency declaration, FEMA is doing what the state's telling them to. We're here. FEMA is there to supplement the state, I mean, they're not there to be the response. People will always blame FEMA. Where's FEMA at? Well, I mean, they're there, but FEMA is not there to do all the nuances of where you live. FEMA doesn't know where which gullies get flooded, which, if Miss Johnson lives on that back road, she needs dialysis. FEMA doesn't know that stuff. Your local people are supposed to know that. So FEMA is there to supplement, not be the response. Everyone wants their state to be independent, states' rights, all that stuff. But for whatever, FEMA is the one where people really, it's different. So, but one thing that's also really important to mention, I should have mentioned this before, is in the recovery process, we're doing damage assessment. So everybody hates the government. Yeah, right. So, but in that time, believe me, the government is on your side, because insurance companies are going to try to screw you over. If you have damage to your house, insurance company will do every single thing they can to make sure they don't pay a dime. That's how they work. So we in that situation are often like your ambulance chaser lawyers, like, no, dude, that you're saying that was damage from 30 years ago. No, that was hail damage from this storm. So, these insurance companies are going to screw you over. But in this case, honestly, the FEMA or the state government people, we are genuinely on your side. We are not with the insurance company to screw them. We want to make sure you get every penny you need to get rebuilt. So we're on your side for that one. So blame the government for a lot of things. But when it comes to FEMA stuff, we're not politicians, man. Nobody cares about that kind of stuff. When the people that are working there are nerds, scientists, we just want the best response. We don't care who you voted for. So yeah, it was a very rewarding job. And I just wish that stuff could be completely separated from the politics. It's frustrating. You can't even escape it anymore. So that's just one aspect where it's like, wait, can you just keep politics out of emergency response and stuff? But you can't. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography. I've been doing some stuff about natural disasters lately. It's not the main focus of this channel, but man, I get really passionate with this stuff. So, my recent video, I was talking about what happened in that area, but it was not the time to put a plug for the map. But these are a beautiful map, and these are Mirway maps. All my videos have a coupon code in the description. You can click on that for 12% off your order. Really beautiful maps. I would never plug something if they're not really good. So, so that, again, stupidly long video. But, chapters, you can skip ahead. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. So yeah, Geography King signing out.